The galaxy is vast, cold, indifferent. It hums with the silent symphony of dying stars and the birth cries of nebulae, a canvas painted in the ink of vacuum and the fire of fusion. For eons, it belonged to the Old Ones, the Cathar Dominion, masters of gravitic manipulation, architects of crystalline cities that floated like frozen tears above gas giants. Their civilization stretched across 1,000 systems, a tapestry woven with threads of logic, order, and an unshakable belief in their own supremacy. They saw themselves as the universe's gardeners, pruning chaos, cultivating stability. And then, they found Earth, not a garden, a graveyard, a planet scarred by its own children, choked with the rust of ancient wars, the air thick with the ghosts of 1,000,000 conflicts. From orbit it looked fragile, pathetic, a blue-green marble wrapped in swirling white, teeming with life that seemed perpetually on the verge of tearing itself apart. The Cathar scouts, their sleek obsidian vessels gliding through the silent dark, observed with detached curiosity. They saw the sprawling, chaotic cities, the primitive combustion engines coughing filth into the atmosphere, the flickering signals of global communication networks broadcasting everything from symphonies to screams. They saw a species defined by contradiction, capable of breathtaking art and unspeakable cruelty, bound by fragile biology yet driven by an inexplicable, relentless will. They called humanity Cathar, the fractured ones, the term laced with clinical disdain. To the Cathar, whose crystalline physiology granted them lifespans measured in centuries and resilience against extremes that would vaporize lesser beings. Human fragility was a cosmic joke. Their bones snapped like dry twigs under minimal stress. Their soft, wet bodies succumbed to pathogens the Cathar immune systems dismissed as mere irritants. Their minds, prone to irrational bursts of emotion, rage, despair, love, seemed dangerously unstable. The Dominion's high conclave debated. Some advocated for immediate quarantine, perhaps even sterilization. Others, like the ambitious Strategos Vectilon, saw opportunity, a species so adaptable, so desperate, perfect for the Dominion's most hazardous frontier, the Shattered Veil. The Shattered Veil wasn't a place, it was a wound in reality. A region of space-time scarred by a cataclysm millennia ago, where the laws of physics frayed at the edges. Gravity wells pulsed erratically. Radiation storms, born of collapsing micro-singularities, lashed out without warning. Strange energies bled through from dimensions unknown, warping matter and mind. It was a graveyard for Cathar survey vessels, their crews driven mad or dissolved into shimmering dust by the Veil's chaotic embrace. But whispers spoke of something valuable within, a stable nexus of exotic matter, the key to unlocking gravitic propulsion beyond even Cathar dreams. A prize worth any cost. And so the offer came. Not an invasion, but a partnership. A chance for the Cathar to prove their worth, to earn a place however menial within the Dominion's grand design, in exchange for technology, clean energy, medical marvels, a seat at the galactic table. They would send their most resilient specimens into the Veil. Human miners, human scouts, human cannon fodder. They didn't understand. They couldn't. They saw only the fragility. They didn't see the fire beneath the skin, the stubborn ember that refused to be extinguished. The terrifying capacity to endure the unendurable when there was simply nowhere else to go. On the surface of Earth, in the sprawling, rain-slicked megacity of Neo-Singapore, the weight of that offer pressed down like the humid air. Captain Anya Rostova stood on the observation deck of the Terran Accord liaison office, her knuckles white on the cool transpiree steel. Below, the city pulsed, a chaotic, vibrant, alive tapestry of neon and desperation. She'd seen the vids from the Veil. Grainy, fragmented transmissions from the first human teams. Screams cut short by static. Images of men and women, faces gaunt, eyes hollow, wrestling with machinery that glowed with sickly, unstable light before vanishing into sudden, silent voids. The Cathar called it acceptable attrition. Anya called it murder. She was a relic of Earth's last great war, a conflict fought over water rights in the deserts of what was once called the American Southwest. She'd commanded a platoon through sandstorms that scoured flesh from bone and ambushes in canyons where the heat mirage hid death until it was too late. She'd seen friends bleed out from wounds that would have been minor with proper med kits, watched comrades snap under the strain of constant grinding survival. She knew human fragility intimately, and she knew with a bone-deep certainty that chilled her more than the recycled air of the office, that the Kempthar had no idea what they were unleashing. Her comm chimed, a soft, insistent tone that cut through the city's drone. "Rostova," she answered, her voice rough, unused to pleasantries. "Captain," came the voice of Director Aris Thorne, head of the Accord. His tone was weary, the voice of a man perpetually negotiating between a rock and an existential void. "Strategos, Valen requests your presence. Immediately. Observation Platform Theta." Inea's jaw tightened. Valen, the architect of this farce, he saw humans as interesting insects to be prodded and observed until they ceased moving. "On my way," she said, cutting the connection. She took one last look at the teeming, fragile life below, the street vendors hawking Sint noodles, the children laughing under flickering holographic ads, the sheer, messy vitality of it all. This was worth fighting for, even if it meant walking into the lion's den. High above the clouds, aboard the Kdathar command vessel's silent edict, Strategos Velon observed the blue planet through a crystalline viewport. His form was tall, slender, composed of interlocking plates of iridescent chitin that shifted subtly with his movements, refracting the soft ambient light into shifting patterns of violet and silver. His multiple eyes, clustered like obsidian beads, held no warmth, only the cold calculation of a master strategist. Beside him, Sub-Strategos Kala stood rigid, his posture radiating barely suppressed contempt. "The Kabul emissary approaches," Strategos Kale intoned, his voice a series of precise clicks and resonant hums, translated by the ship's systems into flat, emotionless standard. "This Rostova. She carries the scent of defiance and decay." Valen's primary ocular cluster focused on the small Terran shuttle docking with the Edict's airlock. "Defiance is predictable, Cow. A symptom of their chaotic biology. Decay is inevitable. They are ephemeral, like sparks in a vacuum." He gestured with a slender, multi-jointed limb towards the main view screen, which now displayed a real-time feed from deep within the shattered veil. A human mining outpost, designated Persephone's Lament, clung to the edge of a swirling vortex of distorted space. Tiny figures in bulky, patched envirosuits moved like ants across its surface, wrestling with machinery that pulsed with dangerous energy. "Observe! They struggle, they break, they die, yet they persist. It is inefficient, illogical, but it serves our purpose. Their short lives are expendable fuel for our ascension." Kale tilted his head, a gesture of agreement. "Their fragility is absolute." Strategos. "One reports a minor hull breach on Persephone's Lament. Atmosphere loss in Sector Gamma. Standard protocol dictates evacuation." "Protocol is for Cathar," Velen replied, a faint harmonic resonance entering his translated voice, a sound Kale recognized as amusement. "Let the Kevar handle it. Observe their response to pressure. Record everything. Their biological limits are of academic interest." Below, on the surface of Persephone's Lament, the pressure was already crushing. Not just atmospheric, but existential. Chief Engineer Mateo Silva slammed his fist against the buckled bulkhead of Sector Gamma. The breach was small, a hairline fracture spiderwebbing across the reinforced plasteel. But the shriek of escaping air was deafening inside his helmet. Alarms blared in his ears, painting his HUD red. Oxygen levels plummeting. Temperature dropping fast. Outside the viewport, the veil churned, a maelstrom of impossible colors and warped starlight that seemed to watch hungry. "Silva to command. Breach in Gamma. Sealing protocols failing. We need evac now." His voice was tight, controlled, but the tremor beneath it was unmistakable. Fear. Cold. Sharp. The comm crackled. Not the calm, reassuring voice of Terran command. It was the flat, synthesized tones of the Cathar overseer. "Acknowledged, Unit Silva. Standard procedure requires local resolution." Evacuation assets are prioritized elsewhere. Contain the breach. Report status. Contain it. Matteo roared, the sound echoing inside his helmet. The sealant foam's frozen solid. The patch plates won't hold against that pressure differential. We're losing atmosphere faster than we can pump it in. There are 12 people in here, you crystalline bastards. Silence. Then the overseer's voice, utterly devoid of inflection. Your resilience is noted, Unit Silva. The Dominion observes. Proceed. The comm clicked off. Abandoned. Left to die in the cold dark, watched like lab rats. Matteo looked around at his crew, faces pale behind visors, eyes wide with terror. Young Lee, barely out of training, was hyperventilating. Old man Henderson, his suit patched with duct tape and hope, gave Matteo a grim nod. They knew the score. The Qadar didn't care if they lived or died, only if they broke. Matteo took a shuddering breath, the cold air burning his lungs even through the suit's filters. He remembered Earth, the smell of rain on hot pavement, his daughter's laugh, the crushing weight of knowing he might never see them again. But breaking? No, that wasn't in the human script, not while there was breath left in his body. All right, listen up, he barked, forcing authority into his voice, pushing down the terror. Lee, Henderson, you're on sealant. Heat the damn foam with your suit cutters. Make it flow. Chen, Rodriguez, get those patch plates aligned. Use the emergency mag clamps. Everyone else, brace against the inner bulkhead. We're gonna hold this thing together with spit, duct tape, and sheer fucking will. Move. They moved. Not with Kinthar precision, but with desperate, clumsy, human urgency. Lee's hands shook as she directed the cutter's beam onto the frozen foam canister. Henderson cursed as a mag clamp slipped, his knuckles bleeding inside his glove. Rodriguez screamed as a shard of plasteel torn loose by the stress sliced through his suit sleeve, drawing blood that instantly began to boil in the near vacuum, before his suit's auto sealants hissed into action. Pain, fear, exhaustion. But they moved. On the silent edict, Valen watched the feed. The humans were a blur of frantic activity, their biosigns spiking with adrenaline, their vitals flickering erratically. Kale shifted beside him. They are inefficient, wasteful of energy. One is injured. Their cohesion is fracturing. Valen's ocular cluster narrowed slightly. Observe the engineer, Silva. His biosigns. They are elevated beyond theoretical limits for their species. Adrenaline saturation is off the scale, yet his motor control remains precise, and the others, they follow him. Despite the injury, despite the fear. A flicker of something unreadable passed through the Strategos's mind. Not respect, not yet. But curiosity. A data point that didn't fit the model. Continue observation. Log all physiological responses. Down on Persephone's lament, Matteo felt the cold seeping deeper, past his suit, into his bones. His vision swam. The breach wasn't sealed, but the airflow had slowed, reduced to a vicious hiss. They'd bought minutes, maybe. Not enough for a rescue that wouldn't come. He looked at his crew, huddled together for warmth. They couldn't share. Their faces etched with exhaustion and the dawning horror of their situation. He thought of his daughter. He thought of Earth. He thought of the cold, uncaring eyes watching them from orbit. He keyed his comm not to the Cathar but on a tight beam frequency only his crew could hear. His voice was a raw whisper, thick with unshed tears and a fury that burned hotter than the veil's radiation. Remember who we are, he rasped. Remember where we come from. They think we're fragile? Let them watch. Let them see what fragile looks like when it refuses to break. He didn't know it, but his words carried on a frequency the Caterpranters weren't actively scanning, were being picked up by a secondary sensor array on the silent edict. Valen heard them. The raw, defiant emotion in that broken whisper, it was illogical, irrational, and utterly, terrifyingly human. And Yarostova stepped onto the pristine, silent deck of the silent edict. The air was cool, sterile, smelling faintly of ozone and something metallic, alien, Conthar warriors, their chitinous forms gleaming, stood like statues along the corridor, their multiple eyes tracking her every move. She felt exposed, vulnerable in her simple Terran uniform. Like a mouse in a cathedral of stone, she was led to the Stratego's observation chamber. Valen stood before the vast viewport, the swirling chaos of the shattered veil reflected in his iridescent carapace. He didn't turn as she entered. "Captain Rostova," his translated voice resonated, smooth as polished stone. "You come bearing the scent of your world's desperation." Anya stopped a respectful distance away, meeting the cluster of dark eyes that finally swiveled towards her. "Eh? I come bearing the concerns of the people you're sending to die," Strategos fill in. "Valen, Persephone's lament just suffered a critical breach. Your overseer denied evacuation. Local resolution was possible," Valen stated, turning fully now. His movements were fluid, economical. "Your engineer, Silva, demonstrated adequate improvisation. The breach is contained. For now." "Contained?" Anya's voice rose, sharp with anger. "They're freezing. One's bleeding. They're running on fumes and fear. That's not containment, Strategos. That's slow execution. You call them core, the fractured ones. You see only their breaking points. You don't see what holds them together." Valen tilted his head. A gesture Anya was learning meant analytical interest. "What holds them together, Captain? Irrational loyalty? Biological imperatives? Sentimentality? These are weaknesses, flaws in design. The Dominion offers order, purpose, an end to your species' self-destructive chaos. The chaos you see is life, Valen." Anya shot back, stepping closer, ignoring the subtle shift in the nearby Cathar guards. "It's messy, it's painful, it's terrifying. But it's ours, and what holds us together isn't weakness. It's the refusal to let go, even when everything else is gone, even when you leave us to die in the dark." She gestured towards the viewscreen, towards the tiny struggling speck that was Persephone's lament. "You think you're testing our limits. You're just showing us yours. Your cold, empty limits." For a fraction of a second Valen was silent. The only sound was the low thrum of the ship and the distant chaotic whisper of the veil. Then a low harmonic hum vibrated from him. A sound Anya couldn't interpret, but it felt heavy. "Your passion is noted, Captain Rostova. Illogical, but noted. The Dominion's path is set. The Kavar will serve. Their endurance will be tested. Their value quantified." He turned back to the viewport, a clear dismissal. "You may return to your fragile world. Observe the result." Anya stood there, fists clenched, the sterile air suddenly suffocating. She wanted to scream, to lash out, to make him see, but she knew it was futile. The Cathar saw only data points, not souls. She turned on her heel, the click of her boots on the deck the only sound in the vast silent chamber, feeling the weight of the galaxy pressing down cold and uncaring. As her shuttle detached and began its descent towards the blue marble below, Anya watched the silent edict shrink against the backdrop of the shattered veil. She thought of Matteo Silva and his crew clinging to life in the frozen dark. She thought of Valen's cold, analytical eyes, and she knew, with a certainty that chilled her blood more than the void outside, that this was only the beginning. The Cathar wanted to see how far human endurance could go. They were about to find out. Weeks bled into months. The shattered veil became a charnel house draped in the illusion of progress. More human outposts sprang up like stubborn weeds in poisoned soil. Orpheus's descent, Sisyphus Station, Icarus Point, each one a monument to human grit and Cathar indifference. The Dominion's promised technology trickled in. Advanced med scanners that could diagnose 100 ailments, but couldn't synthesize the complex organic compounds needed to cure most of them. Energy cells that powered cities but required rare isotopes only found within the veil itself, forcing deeper, deadlier forays. It was a gilded cage built on human bones. Captain Anya Rostova became a ghost haunting the corridors of the Terran Accord, her reports growing increasingly desperate. Her pleas for intervention met with bureaucratic shrugs and veiled threats from Cathar liaisons. "Patience, Captain," Director Thorne would sigh, rubbing his temples. "The Dominion holds the keys to our future. We cannot afford to provoke. Anya saw the fear in his eyes, the fear of losing the fragile peace, the fear of the Cathar's overwhelming power. She saw the same fear reflected in the hollow eyes of the survivors who occasionally limped back from the veil, their bodies broken, their minds scarred by the veil's whispers and the Cathar's neglect. One such survivor was Li Chen. Young, brilliant, her hands still trembling slightly as she sat across from Anya in a dimly lit medbay on Luna Station. Her left arm was encased in a bioregen cast, the skin beneath mottled with frostbite scars. Her eyes, once bright with ambition, were shadowed pools of trauma. "They watched us, Captain," Li whispered, her voice raw. "Through the breach. I saw the sensor drones, hovering, recording, like we were specimens. When Rodriguez bled, they just logged it." She shuddered. "Mateo, he held us together, told us stories about Earth, about his daughter, made us laugh. Even as the cold aided us. Said we had to show them what fragile really meant." A tear traced a path through the grime on her cheek. He didn't make it. The cold, it got him in the end. Just stopped moving. But he never broke. Not once. Anya reached across the table, her calloused hand covering Li's trembling one. He showed them. He showed them all. But the victory felt hollow, ashes in her mouth. How many more Mateos would it take? Aboard the silent edict, the data flowed. Valen's chambers were now dominated by holographic displays, not of star charts but of human biosigns, stress responses, endurance metrics. The initial curiosity had hardened into a cold, obsessive focus. The Kavar were defying all projections. They weren't just surviving the Veil's physical horrors, they were adapting to its psychological ones. Where Kavar minds fractured under prolonged exposure to the Veil's reality-warping fields, human minds twisted. Yes, but often found strange anchors, songs, memories, shared jokes, a fierce, illogical loyalty to their comrades. It was inefficient, illogical, fascinating. Sub-Strategos, Kale watched his superior with growing unease. Strategos. The data is anomalous. Their pain tolerance exceeds models by 300%. Their cooperative behavior under duress is excessive. It consumes resources that should be directed towards task completion. This endurance, it is a flaw, a dangerous instability. Valen's ocular cluster remained fixed on a feed from Sisyphus Station. A human team was attempting to retrieve a core sample from a micro-singularities accretion disk. Radiation alarms screamed. One worker collapsed, convulsed. Instead of abandoning the mission, the others dragged the fallen comrade back, shielding him with their own bodies as they retreated, taking massive radiation doses themselves. Their biosigns spiked into the red, then stabilized through sheer adrenaline-fueled will. A flaw, Kale. Valen's harmonic hum was low, thoughtful. Or a weapon. Imagine an army that does not break, that fights on with broken bones and failing organs, that drags its wounded through hell itself. He turned, his form seeming to absorb the dim light. The Dominion has always valued order, predictability, but the universe is chaos. Perhaps we have been pruning the wrong branches. Kale recoiled, his chitin plates flaring slightly in alarm. Strategos. Such thoughts border on heresy. The Kavor are chaotic, unstable. To weaponize their instability, it risks contaminating our own purity. Risk is the price of ascension, Kale. Valen stated, his voice regaining its usual cold certainty, though a new edge lingered. Continue the observations. Push them harder. Find their true breaking point, if they have one. The push came in the form of Directive Sigma 7. Delivered not with fanfare but with the chilling efficiency of a death warrant. All human outposts within the primary Veil zone were to cease defensive protocols. Life support systems on non-essential sectors were to be powered down to conserve energy for core mining operations. Medical supplies were to be strictly rationed. Optimization, the Kinthar communique stated blandly, maximizing resource allocation for Dominion objectives. It was a death sentence. Slow, cold, and deliberate. On Icarus Point, the directive hit like a physical blow. Commander Alara Vance, a veteran of Earth's Pacific Reclamation Wars, stared at the message on her cracked terminal, her face grim. Around her the station groaned, a symphony of stressed metal and failing systems. The air was thin, cold, the lights flickered erratically. Outside, the veil churned, its chaotic energies seeming to pulse with malicious glee. "We're being left to rot," Vance said, her voice flat. She turned to her second-in-command, a grizzled ex-miner named Bren. "Bren, options." Bren spat on the deck plating, a futile gesture in the recycled air. "Options? We got two. Freeze slow or try to jury-rig the damn life support with spit and prayers. Maybe siphon power from the mining lasers. Risk blowing the whole station. Then we blow it," Vance said, her eyes hardening. "Better a quick end than watching my people turn into ice statues." "But," she paused, looking at the faces of her crew, haggard, scared, but still there. Still fighting. "We don't go quiet. We send a message. A big one." The plan was audacious, born of desperation and a lifetime of fighting against impossible odds. They would overload the station's primary gravitic stabilizer, the very device that kept Icarus Point from being shredded by the Veil's tidal forces. The resulting energy surge, channeled through the mining laser array, wouldn't just destroy the station. It would create a focused pulse of exotic radiation, a beacon visible across the Veil, and straight to the silent edict. It was suicide. Glorious, defiant suicide. As they worked, bypassing safety protocols, rerouting power conduits with hands numb from cold, Vance thought of Earth. Not the war-torn hellscape the Cathars saw, but the smell of pine forests after rain, the taste of real coffee, the sound of children playing in a park. She thought of the Cathar watching from their sterile ship, expecting them to whimper and die. Let them see what fragile looks like when it chooses how it breaks. Aboard the silent edict, the alert was sudden, violent. Klaxons blared, a sound rarely heard on the pristine Cathar vessel. Valen strode onto the command deck, his chatin plates flared in alarm. "Report," he commanded, his harmonic hum sharp. "Strategos." Kyle's voice was tight with disbelief. "Source Icarus Point. Massive, uncontrolled energy surge building in their gravitic core. It's being directed towards us." Valen's ocular cluster snapped to the main view screen. Icarus Point, a tiny speck against the Veil's maelstrom, was glowing with an unnatural, blinding light. Not the chaotic flicker of failure, but a focused, coherent beam lancing out, aimed directly at the silent edict. "They're attacking?" Kale stammered, the concept alien, unthinkable. "With what? Scrap metal and desperation?" "No," Valen breathed, the harmonic resonance in his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Awe? Horror? They're communicating." He saw it now, the raw, suicidal defiance, the refusal to be passive victims. The message wasn't just in the energy pulse, it was in the act itself. "We see you, we know what you are, and we choose our own end." Shields to maximum. Evasive maneuvers. Valen roared, the command tearing from him. But it was too late. The pulse, born of human desperation and ingenuity, struck the edict's forward shields, not with the brute force of a weapon, but with a chaotic, reality-warping energy that the Cathar shields, designed for coherent energy weapons, couldn't fully dissipate. The ship shuddered violently. Lights flickered. Consoles. A wave of disorientation, a psychic echo of the Veil's madness, washed over the bridge crew. Cathar warriors cried out, clutching their heads as alien sensations, fear, rage, sorrow, flooded their ordered minds. On the view screen, Icarus Point erupted. Not in a silent vacuum explosion, but in a silent, expanding sphere of light that seemed to tear at the fabric of space itself before winking out, leaving only debris and the lingering echo of human defiance. Silence descended on the silent edict's bridge, thick and heavy. The Cathar crew stood stunned, their ordered world momentarily fractured by the raw, chaotic emotion of the human sacrifice. Valen stared at the empty space where Icarus Point had been. The data stream from the pulse was flooding his systems, encrypted, complex but laced with something primal. Not just coordinates or schematics. Feelings. The cold terror of the void. The warmth of remembered sunlight. the crushing weight of betrayal, the fierce, burning ember of refusal. He accessed the raw sensor logs from the pulse impact. Buried within the chaotic energy signature, almost lost, was a final looping transmission from Commander Vance, broadcast on an open frequency just before the overload. Tell them, tell the cold eyes watching, we were never fragile, we were just waiting for a reason to burn. Valen stood utterly still. The harmonic resonance within him was gone, replaced by a profound, unsettling silence. The model was shattered. The Kavalar weren't just enduring. They were transforming their suffering into something the Kavalar couldn't comprehend. Something dangerous, something powerful. Kale approached, his voice trembling with outrage and fear. Stratos. This is rebellion. Unacceptable. We must purge the remaining outposts. Sterilize the veil, before their chaos spreads. Valen slowly turned. His ocular cluster fixed on Kal-El, but his gaze seemed to look through him, into the swirling chaos of the veil, into the ghostly echo of Vance's final words. When he spoke, his voice was low, resonant with a new, terrifying certainty. Purge them? Valen echoed, the harmonic hum returning, but deeper, darker. No, Kale. We have been blind. We sought to measure their breaking point, but we have only just begun to witness their forging. He turned back to the viewscreen, his form seeming to absorb the chaotic light of the veil. Prepare the fleet. All Dominion assets in the sector. We are not withdrawing. We are escalating. If the Kinvar wish to burn, we will give them an inferno worthy of their spirit, and we will see if even they can endure this. The order hung in the air, colder than the void outside. The slow burn was over. The war for the shattered veil and the soul of humanity had just ignited. The Cathar response was not subtle. It was annihilation. The silent edict was joined by a dozen more vessels of the Dominion fleet, sleek, obsidian daggers of war bristling with gravitic lances and reality-shearing cannons. They didn't just blockade the human outposts. They herded them. Using precise, localized gravity pulses, they pushed the fragile stations deeper into the most unstable regions of the shattered veil, into zones where space-time itself was unraveling, where radiation levels could melt Cathar hulls in minutes. It was a crucible, a final, brutal test, on the remnants of Sisyphus Station, now adrift in a nebula of corrosive plasma. Commander Vance's successor, a former street medic named Jax, rallied the survivors. Their station was dying, groaning under stresses it was never designed to withstand. Atmosphere hissed from 100 micro-fractures. The lights were gone, replaced by the sickly, pulsing glow of the veil outside the viewports. Food was gone. Water was rationed to sips. Hope was a luxury they couldn't afford. They're pushing us into the maw, Jax rasped, his voice raw from breathing the thin metallic air. He stood before the huddled group in the dim emergency lighting of the command center. 20 souls, all that remained of 100, faces gaunt, eyes sunken, but burning with a hard, desperate light. Valen wants to see if we break, if we beg, if we turn on each other. He slammed a fist against the buckled console. Well, we won't give him the satisfaction. We're not just holding on, we're gonna fight back. How, Jax? Li Chen asked, her voice weak but steady. She'd been transferred here after Luna Station, her frost-bitten arm a constant reminder. We've got rocks and rage. They've got a Jax's eyes gleamed in the gloom. They pushed us here for a reason. This sector, it's unstable. Too unstable. Their fancy ships can't get too close without risking their own hulls. But us, he gestured around at the crumbling station. We're already in hell. What's a little deeper? He pointed to a schematic flickering on a dying screen. A network of unstable micro-singularities, like landmines scattered through the plasma nebula. We lure them in. We use the veil itself as our weapon. We overload our core, not in a straight line like Icarus, but in a pulse. A shockwave timed to hit when their fleet is clustered, trying to contain us. The veil's chaos will amplify it, turn their own gravity weapons against them. It was madness. Suicide squared. But in the faces around him, Jax saw no fear of death, only the fire of defiance. the refusal to be erased without a scream that echoed across the stars. They began to work, not with the efficiency of machines but with the desperate, clumsy human urgency of those with nothing left to lose. They rerouted power from life support to the core. They jury-rigged detonators from mining charges. They sang old Earth songs to keep their spirits up, their voices thin but defiant in the cold dark. They shared their last sips of water, their last crumbs of nutrient paste. They held each other as the station shuddered, as the Veil's whispers tried to claw into their minds. They were breaking. Yes, bones ached, lungs burned, minds frayed. But the core, the unbreakable core of human spirit. Aboard the Silent Edict, Valen watched the feed from Sisyphus Station. The humans were moving, not fleeing, preparing. His ocular cluster narrowed. They were attempting the impossible. Again, Kale stood beside him, vibrating with impatience. Strategos. They are clearly attempting another suicidal gesture. Let them destroy themselves. It proves their instability, their worthlessness. Valen didn't answer immediately. He watched a human, a woman with a scarred arm, carefully solder a connection with trembling hands, her face set in fierce concentration. He saw another sharing his oxygen mask, with a comrade who was coughing blood. He saw Jax, standing tall amidst the chaos, directing his people with a calm authority that defied their circumstances. This wasn't just endurance, this was leadership, born of shared suffering, forged in the fires of abandonment. They are not worthless, Kale, Valen said, his voice low, resonant with a dawning, terrifying understanding. They are adapting. The Veil is not just testing them, it is changing them, forging something new, something the Dominion cannot control. A flicker of something akin to fear passed through him. Not fear of their weapons, but fear of what they represented. A force of chaos that could not be pruned, only consumed, or joined. Order the fleet to tighten the cordon. Force them to trigger their device. We will observe the full extent of their transformation. The trap was sprung. The Kekthar fleet, a constellation of obsidian death, closed in on the drifting hulk of Sisyphus Station, herding it towards the heart of the plasma nebula, towards the cluster of micro-singularities. Gravitic lances probed the station, testing its integrity, pushing it deeper into the maelstrom. On the bridge of the Silent Edict, Valen watched, his mind racing. He expected the final desperate overload. He braced for the chaotic pulse. What he didn't expect was the timing. Jax didn't wait to be pushed over the edge. As the Kekthar fleet maneuvered into its optimal containment position, clustering just outside the nebula's most violent currents, Sisyphus Station detonated, not with a single pulse but with a series of precisely timed micro-explosions along its spine, shattering the station into a cloud of superheated debris. At the exact moment of fragmentation, the overloaded core unleashed its energy, not as a beam but as a spherical shockwave of pure chaotic gravitic energy. The Veil, already unstable, reacted. The shockwave didn't just travel, it resonated with the nebula's plasma and the micro-singularities. The singularities flared, their event horizons distorting violently. The plasma ignited, not with fire but with cascading reality fractures. The carefully positioned Kekthar fleet was caught in the heart of the maelstrom. On the Silent Edict's bridge, alarms screamed like damned souls. The viewscreen dissolved into static, then reformed to show utter chaos. A Kekthar destroyer, caught in the gravitational shear of a flaring singularity, was wrenched apart like tinfoil, its crystalline hull screaming as it fractured into a million glittering shards. Another vessel, engulfed in the plasma surge, its shields flickering and dying, was consumed by a wave of corrosive energy that ate through its armor like acid, revealing the writhing, chitinous forms of its crew before they too dissolved. The gravitic shockwave slammed into the Silent Edict itself, not with physical force, but with a wave of pure, disorienting wrongness. The ship lurched violently, lights died, consoles exploded in showers of sparks. Kekthar warriors cried out, not in pain but in existential terror, as the Veil's chaotic energies flooded their ordered minds, showing them visions of entropy, of their own crystalline forms crumbling to dust, of a universe without logic or order. Valen was thrown from his command throne, his chaton scraping against the deck. He struggled to rise, his multiple eyes struggling to focus through the psychic storm. He saw Kyle, his form trembling, his ocular cluster wide with primal fear, the fear the Cathar had spent millennia suppressing. He saw his fleet, the pride of the Dominion's frontier, being unmade by the very chaos they sought to control, amplified by the suicidal defiance of the Cavors. And then, through the static and the screams, a new signal pierced the chaos. Not from the debris of Sisyphus Station. From everywhere. From the other outposts, Orpheus's descent, the remnants of Persephone's lament, even hidden transmitters on derelict Cathar probes the humans had scavenged. It was a single, unified frequency. A song. It was rough, off-key, sung by voices raw with cold and radiation sickness. But it was unmistakable. An old Earth folk song. A song of home, of resilience, of finding light in the darkest night. Carry me home, across the sea. Carry me home to where I ought to be. The song washed over the silent edict, cutting through the psychic static, a beacon of pure, unadulterated humanity in the heart of the inferno. Valen froze. He felt it, not just heard it. The longing, the sorrow, the fierce, unbreakable love for a fragile, broken world. It wasn't logic, it wasn't order, it was something deeper, something the Cathar had lost millennia ago, something that could endure. In that moment Valen understood. The Cathar hadn't been testing human endurance. They had been igniting it. And the fire they had unleashed, it could consume them all. The battle was over before it truly began. The Cathar fleet was shattered, scattered, fleeing the Veil's amplified wrath and the haunting song of the dying humans. The silent edict, crippled but intact, hung in the relative calm at the nebula's edge, a wounded predator licking its wounds. Valen stood alone on the observation deck, the chaotic light of the Veil painting shifting patterns on his chiton. The song had faded, replaced by the silence of the void and the groans of his damaged ship. The data streams were clear: catastrophic losses, strategic failure. The exotic matter nexus was lost, buried deeper in the Veil's chaos than ever. The Cavor were gone, erased. A final defiant ember extinguished, but Valen felt no triumph. Only a profound, hollow emptiness, and a dawning, terrifying realization. He accessed the final logs from Sisyphus Station, the raw sensor data from the detonation, buried within the energy signatures, woven into the fabric of the chaotic pulse itself, was something the initial analysis had missed. Not just a song, a blueprint, a crude, desperate schematic encoded in the fluctuations of the gravitic shockwave. It showed how the humans had jury-rigged their core, how they'd used the Veil's own instabilities against the Cathar fleet. It was inefficient, illogical, full of redundancies born of fear and hope. But it worked, and it was a gift. Valen stared at the schematic, then out at the swirling chaos of the Veil. The humans hadn't just fought back. In their final act, they had shown the Cathar how to survive it, not with cold logic but with adaptability, with sacrifice, with the willingness to embrace the chaos, to use it, to become part of it. They had shown the Dominion the path forward, not as conquerors but as students. He turned to the comm panel. His harmonic hum was steady, resolute. All surviving vessels. This is Strategos Phalon. Recall all forces. Withdraw from the shattered Veil sector. Full retreat. He paused, the weight of his next words settling on him like a shroud. And transmit the following data packet to High Conclave. Priority Omega. Include all logs from the Camor engagements. All biosign data. All final transmissions. He took a breath, the alien equivalent of steeling himself. Add this message. The fractured ones are gone, but they have shown us the flaw in our perfection. The path through the chaos is not order, but endurance. We must learn to burn. He cut the comm. The silence returned, deeper now. He looked down at his own chitinous hands, instruments of cold logic and dominion. Could they learn to hold something else? Something fragile? Something that burned? On the view screen, the Veil churned, indifferent. But within its chaotic heart, Valen imagined he could still hear the faint, fading echo of a human song, a song of home, a song of endurance, a song that had cost everything and given everything. The Kantha had mocked human fragility. They had pushed them to the absolute edge of existence, into the heart of a cosmic storm, and demanded they break. And the humans, in their final glorious, devastating act, had shown them the truth. Fragility isn't the absence of strength. It's the crucible in which the strongest spirit is forged. They hadn't just endured, they had transcended, and in doing so they had left behind not just a graveyard but a legacy, a single searing lesson etched in starlight and sacrifice, echoing through the cold void. How far can human endurance go? Far enough to change the galaxy. Far enough to make even the masters of order afraid of the dark. Far enough to burn forever.